there's like a ton of history about like good and bad and what's allowed and what's not allowed. Interestingly, I have no idea how I came across this, right? But there's the law that says that the woman's voice shouldn't be heard by someone that's not, her husband or her family members.
Mahram, yeah.
Yeah. So you think that's a Muslim law, right? That law is found word for word in Jewish books.
Mm.
That law comes from Judaism. How did Muslims end up with that law? How? There's
There are
plenty
many
of,
things that
yeah,
we agree on with
because,
other scriptures.
yeah, but what often, and this is one of those favorite things that certain groups that begin with a T and that are in a certain country called that begin with an A love, right? In order to, you could say, control women. But it seems a bit, I think, suspect that it's word for word, literally, what is in Jewish text. Now, one thing we have to remember is that Jewish laws were extremely pedantic and minute on their details. And one thing that we were asked in the Quran to protect us from was from those sort of laws. It's at the end of the second chapter, you know, to save yourself from the burden of those before and to save you from a burden that you can't bear. It's actually a reference to all of these laws that the Jews had because, they kept asking questions and they kept inquiring about, the best way to act, and it kept adding laws and laws and laws onto them. But that's why these laws are there. It seems as if certain laws, like, that would particularly stop women's movements or stop what women can do, and then also certain movements like punishments like stoning. These are not found in Islam. They're actually, they're not in the Quran. There's nothing about, at the time of the Prophet that many of these things happened. It sort of filters into Hadith later. And that's the thing where a lot of what we think is good and bad is like, it's a lot of history behind it. A
Mm.
lot, we've had a lot of empires, we've had a lot of, Hadith and a lot of philosophers and scholars and lawmakers that have added a lot of things to the mix. And I
Yeah.
think you have to kind of unpack that and think, well, how much of it is actually man-made as well?